I want to talk about this sanitary product story. And Clayton was a little bit squeamish about it. And I'm going to tell you to get the F over yourself, because
No, I
if
love-
women
hold
did
on.
not menstruate, you would not exist.
I would not be here. I get that. I'm not squeamish about it. I'm very aware of like the kind of stuff that, gets you deplatformed, and it's kind of crazy. That's where we're at right now in this modern big tech oligarchy. So you give me cross-eyed views when I suggest like we're going to do this story and you're like, I don't know, are they going to ban us for this?
We can talk about a national supply shortage of sanitary products.
Okay.
I didn't bring any to demonstrate. Right? I'm not going to talk about gender. I'm only going to talk about the fact that there is a shortage of products that disproportionately affect women, such as baby formula, right? Because women are usually the primary caregivers of babies, and sanitary products. Okay, so this is happening, and it is only just coming to our attention. Before we get there, let's get an update from the White House on baby formula shortage.
So I have two questions on baby formula. So first, what is the latest update the White House has received on the current infant formula situation across the country?
Yeah, let me see if I have anything new for you on that. So I think it's been a couple of days since we have been asked that question. Okay. I don't have anything new. I know we made some announcements last week. I just don't have them in front of me.
Okay, I have something new. So just before we went to air, I was watching the Senate congressional testimony about this baby formula shortage. The Senate is considering enacting the Sherman Act to give itself more regulation over the baby formula industry, which is interesting, right? Because government regulation is very much what caused the baby formula shortage. Now, it was one factory or one company that had this problem with bacteria that was harming babies.
Abbott Foods.
But why was there only one formula? Why is 80% of the baby formula market coming out of two or three companies? Well, economist Scott Lincecum today testified before Congress, and he made the point that it's actually government regulation that caused this shortage, not free market rules. But the Senate wants to use the Sherman Act to give itself more regulation over the industry. But it was really the government that caused this. He makes the point that the federal government has allowed market concentration by making huge barriers of entry into the market, high regulation, fees, red tape, and a ban on exports. Now, here he lays out his argument, and I did screen grab this movie, but because it was live, the audio is a little bit tinny because I was just capturing it as he was speaking. But he talks about how the FDA in recent years has shut down imports of European formula. So can we play what he's saying and play the volume? Do you have it?
Said that they prefer the quality or the content or simply the recipe of European baby formula. They found that their babies respond better to that, no fussy tummies and the rest, as I think parents in this room can certainly understand. They have sought to import that product, but because of FDA restrictions, because of those tariffs, no European producers are willing to expend the time and capital needed to establish distribution channels, get into supermarkets. So instead, there's this gray market out there for European baby formula that goes through third-party retailers. Now, that market was pretty healthy, no pun intended, until a couple years ago when the FDA started cracking down on European product. Customs started seizing and destroying formula at the border. The FDA issued a major recall because certain products, the labels weren't exactly like the FDA wanted, or the scoopers were a slightly different size. Never mind that those third-party retailers were actually translating instructions, giving the conversions and the rest.
So we're really concerned about like the metric system. Like that's the reason we couldn't get baby formula.
And literally destroyed it, right? So American consumers wanted it, not just because the babies responded better, but because there are certain ingredients and chemicals that are banned in Europe that are not banned in the United States. For instance, high fructose corn syrup is not allowed in Europe. It is allowed in baby formula in the United States. So it's no wonder that moms wanted to import their formula, but the government purposely made it harder, right? Instead of maybe ban these chemicals in American formulas, no, they had to make it harder for moms to get the more preferred formulas, right? And because they didn't meet the labeling standards, he goes on to argue, and it's worth watching. He did a fantastic job to argue that the United States could, in fact, rely on overseas regulatory bodies where they don't have a problem, like Australia, where the formula is high quality, and just accept the Australian certification of formula and import. But the government really doesn't want to do that. What the government wants to do is use this shortage to give itself more regulatory powers, when it was really government perversion of the free market that caused this. So that's pretty infuriating, don't you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I heard, Robert Reich talk about this, not, a huge fan, but what he had to say about this was pretty interesting. Abbott Foods specifically, yes, they have a monopoly on food. Like, why do we not have more sources of baby food in the United States? Like, let alone the European imports of baby food, like in food. And that's one piece of this, right? So the illegal customs breaking it down and smashing it and getting rid of it, the FDA. Why do we not have more competition in the United States? Why is there like one brand on the friggin' shelf filled with high fructose corn syrup?
Right.
I wonder why. Just think about it for a second. If you understand the way that Congress works and the subsidies and the way that these guys pay members of Congress through lobbying efforts, there's a reason why there's a hegemony from this big company.
Well, and now I think we will see this played out in terms of sanitary products. And one thing that bothers me the most about media coverage about this is the media coverage will tell you, well, there's nowhere to turn. Women don't know what to do with their babies, and fathers too, obviously, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Baby formula is relatively new to humanity, right? And women in the past who could not nurse, and I want to sort of acknowledge that that has always been the case, that there are some women who could not nurse, but in the past, women had a community and they wet nursed each other's babies.
There's a lot of shaming going on. There's a lot of women who cannot nurse, right? Because there's like, well, why don't you just nurse? Like the hippies will say that. Well, the fact of the matter is, a lot of women try to nurse and they physically can't, or they have some sort of an issue that they just can't do it. So they try and they try and they try and they give up, and then they have to turn to formula.
Well, in fact, this is happening, right? So if you look at this most recent article, it says women are volunteering to wet nurse each other's babies. But the mainstream media is not telling us this, because the headline that, oh, your baby's going to starve is more clickable. In fact, a group called Human Milk for Human Babies calls milk sharing nature's contingency plan. And I just want to make the point, we're here. This is it. If we need a contingency plan, it's for this moment, right?
Right.
So why isn't the media promoting these solutions? In fact, I was a pretty good producer of milk, and I looked into sharing my milk with other moms, but there's a high barrier to that, because you have to get it tested and like make sure, I don't know, like I'm not exactly sure but that never was the case in terms of like history. I think this has to do with business. And I think similarly, right, the media may or may not pick up on a shortage of sanitary products.
So the media, I agree with you. Then you make a good point, which is it's the business aspect of it. If they start telling you, hey, you don't need to use Similac or whatever the brand is, you can just use your neighbor. Well, there's no money in that.
Well, yes. And that's problematic enough because of the sort of fragmented way in which we live, right? And not everyone has a community of mommies. And some people, think of, I try and think of my friend who her husband was sent all over the world, and she moved to Japan and Germany and all of these places, and she didn't know anybody, and she, wouldn't have had an opportunity to say who else is nursing at this time when I'm nursing, right? And so that's not necessarily the case. But now on to nature's contingency plan for menstruation, right? reusable items exist. In fact, single-use disposable menstruation products are a relatively new phenomenon. The factory-made tampon is not even 100 years old. And in fact, according to the Embryo Project Encyclopedia, in ancient Rome, women made similar devices to the tampon from wool, while ancient Indonesian women used vegetable fibers. Women in Africa made such devices from grass, and ancient Japanese women created similar devices from paper. So could I do this if I had to?
Papyrus.
I'm sure I could. That'd be pretty itchy.
Ancient Chinese secret.
But we don't have to, right? Today we have the menstrual cup, which is not single use, which in my view should have a Nobel Prize. It is a Nobel Prize worthy device. I could talk a blue streak about how awesome the Diva Cup is, but I won't. We have reusable pads that are made from sustainable material like bamboo. I also have a collection of those for when my daughters begin to menstruate. We have menstrual underwear, which have come a long way. I'd be happy to talk to you about this. And this is not an educational product, like about what our options are. But I want to say, why won't we discuss reducing dependence on single-use objects in the same breath as the discussion about shortages? Is it for the same reason that the media doesn't promote any solutions about formula? Is it because the media doesn't want to wean you off of their sponsors, like Procter & Gamble, which makes pads and tampons?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And you just go to, you go to these stores. I don't know, like, we're looking at video right now of like these are a lot of the different stores that are empty, like all of these bare shelves right now from these main products. So is it a shortage from cotton?
Yes,
what's
these
the issue?
products are made of plastic, right? Which takes a lot of manufacture. It takes oil to make plastics, which we have a shortage of. It takes cotton to make a lot of these. It takes pesticides. You may not know this, but the cotton that you use for these sanitary products had to have pesticides on it when it was grown. So that is also put next to your lady parts. It takes oil to deliver those things to the store. It takes labor, which also there's a shortage of, right? So it stands to reason that this particular product would be especially susceptible to supply chain issues. But I think that it's important that every time we talk about this, we remind ourselves that there are sustainable, not single-use products that could, and in fact, there are charities that focus on getting the menstrual cup or reusable products to impoverished women all over the world. Because because even if you can buy a tampon, a box of tampons is expensive, and it adds up really fast. And so
I think also,
yeah, go ahead.
We kind of live in a fast food society, so I think like a lot of people see single use as much easier and reusable as just more difficult to adapt to because they're so used to everything going so fast.
Yes, yeah, but I also think it's really a bummer to like just go out and drop $5 or $6 on a box of tampons, and I've been there, and it's also really not a bummer when you don't ever have to do that. You just keep your menstrual cup with you, and it's it's a lack of education.
I only buy them
and
if I have a cold, so.
For his nose, yeah.
I think
the problem I have, is that you're hitting on the point where, we're talking about these big products, these companies that lobby Congress, that give members of Congress a ton of money, like the Procters and Gambles of the world, right? The Bayers of the world. They just give an enormous amount of money to Congress. And then what they do is that when we bail them out, they take that money and they buy their own shares back. They don't clean up their bacteria like Abbott Foods didn't. They had the opportunity to clean up their plant. They didn't with all the money that they got. And instead, they now are getting extra money from the government to make sure that they're getting these food shortages using the Defense Authorization Act to make sure, like, we're going to ramp up production, doing what we can to ramp this up. All of these big companies that we hear these stories about, they're always these big businesses that are always, it's like they're getting free media coverage also on top of it.
Yes, but I guess... yes, I'm disappointed in the government for its reaction to formula, right? To outlaw healthier European formula. and now say, well, I guess we got to let it through because we regulated to the point where we were over dependent on one company and shoot, babies are getting hurt, right?
Bag asks the question, where can you go for a reusable tampon? And look, I know this is maybe a difficult subject for some guys to hear.
That's not a thing.
It's not a real thing, but no, but like there is like, I am supportive of this. There's what, the Diva cup, which women use, or some women use.
It's called the menstrual cup, right? And then there are reusable pads that are made from like charcoal and bamboo that are more natural. They don't have as many chemicals in them. And then there's also the menstrual underwear, which I'm told that young girls are using by themselves. I have not done that, but I'm told that some people are just using these menstrual underwear. But that's, again, you just wash it and you're ready to go, right? And I guess every time we talk about supply chain issues of something, I feel like this is a clue for us to think about, how do I reduce my dependency on the supply chain every single time? So if it's about formula, well, okay, can I maybe, strengthen my community so that I have, or, should I don't know. It's for us to ask personal questions, not complain on YouTube about the government, right? And so we in our house are worried about like water supplies. So we take buckets in the shower and water the garden with it, or, that kind of thing. I'm concerned, obviously.
We need to clarify that a little bit. While the water is heating up, we get, use the buckets, capture the water, so it's not wasting it.
Because we don't take cold showers. We're not that hippie.
Yeah, and then like that, okay, so then we have a bucket, because it'll take like a whole bucket or even more to get like a warm shower, right? So then you use that bucket and use it for other purposes in the house, watering plants and other things like that. So there's a little ways
we put it in the kettle So I just I wish that the conversation about supply chain ended with a way to empower ourselves, right? There's no eggs, buy a chicken, and that's a metaphor, but we did actually buy chickens. So anything like that, if you're hurting for sanitary products, then this is the inflection point, Get reusable things.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.